It just made sense to me. So I just, while I was working full time in a completely different career out of broadcasting, I started going to American Hockey League games and on my weekends and being in a booth and calling the game into my phone and recording myself. And that's where it started. And driving around to Manitoba Junior Hockey League games and calling them online just to get repetition. And then finally going back to Sportsnet, they had the Canadian Women's Hockey League 4 games, and they allowed me the opportunity to do it. And that's what I mean. Like that relationship when I lost my job there, it was nothing more than economics. Didn't burn that bridge, even though, it hurt, didn't burn that bridge. And they gave me that great opportunity. And, and I went with it, called women's games, called a couple of championship games for the women's league at that time. And then ESPN came knocking about the NCAA tournament. And I went down and called a couple of regionals and, and then it just kind of gained momentum. But COVID, unfortunately, took all that momentum away. And I had just called an NHL game with Sportsnet, the first woman, as you mentioned, to do it on national television. And suddenly, boom, the world shut down. And I didn't call for over a year. But then we finally came back to life with it. And I went down and did the regional NCAA final in Fargo. And it was the University of North Dakota and University of Minnesota Duluth, and it ended up being the longest game in NCAA history. It went into 5 overtimes. The hockey God smiled on me. And 2 days later, I was on the phone with ESPN talking to a gentleman I'd known for years and pitching him, I want to report. I'll do that because I'd done that for them before. But I said, I'm a play-by-play and I want to call play-by-play. And they gave me that opportunity. So I've just been trying to work at it and get better as we go along here. And I've called now at 25 NHL games on my resume. So, but getting those weekly calls with ESPN, it's just a game changer. It's been such an experience, the travel, getting to call these athletes that are just so incredible, as you guys know, and just getting to be in the rink and, doing playoffs. I got to call 2 Stanley Cup playoff games. I mean, it's just such a dream. And it wasn't a dream growing up because I had no idea women could do this because I didn't see anybody doing it. But now it really is amazing. And anything that's negative about it, you just have to work through because you just got to keep your eye on the prize of what and why you're doing it.
No, that's incredible. And you share some really insightful inspiration in terms of what it means and what it takes to get through this. Now, there was a little birdie that told me that Mike Doc Emmerich inspired you a little bit, encouraged you to getting into this. Now that you are kind of, and I don't want to use this word loosely, but pioneer, like you've set a stone and a step for women everywhere, for young women. What do you encourage them or share with them if they want to get into sports? It may not necessarily be hockey, it could be baseball. I wonder how that conversation would go out in your house if you told, your dad, actually, I want to get into baseball instead of hockey. But what kind of message would you convey to them? Because you see the women's sport growing, and you see it, way more people are interested. There's way more viewership for the Olympics with the women's when they face off U.S. versus Canada. What are your thoughts there?
It's funny because I was having a conversation today with someone who is, in the business and starting to make her way. And, it's still as difficult as it was back when I first started. And there is more women than ever before holding positions, but just the industry, female, male, gender aside, the industry is just tough. It's so tough. I mean, I think about when I went to school, there's maybe 1 or 2 of us from my graduating class that are still in the business and that have been able to stick with it. It is not easy. It is not, when you are first starting out, you make no money. Like, people need to know, my first job, I made $650 every 2 weeks. I made $25,000 before taxes when I moved to CTV Winnipeg. And we're not talking 20, this was, it's hard. It's a hard business to get through. You have to love it. So that's the biggest thing. You cannot be a poser. You cannot just come in and think, because I'm a woman, because I'm a pretty face, I can stand here, look good, read a teleprompter, and I'm going to do it. If you're going to really do it, you got to put in the work like anything else. And you got to know what you're talking about. But most of all, you have to love it, because I think you guys can tell, or at least I feel like I can tell, who really loves what they do, whether it's in sports broadcasting or any profession. And because it's so competitive and because it's so demanding and it takes so much time away, because I mean, I'm gone 50% of the time. I'm on a plane 50% of the time. If you don't love it and love the people that you are with and working with, it wouldn't happen. So I think that's the biggest thing is if, without true passion, greatness can never be achieved is one of my favorite sayings. And I really believe in this industry, that's the bottom line.
So how do you approach people that will say, maybe you were not the most qualified for that job to become a play-by-play announcer?
Well, I would agree with them. I was not the most qualified to do the job. I have never said I was the most qualified to do the job. I think what we have to understand, and this is really, really key, is about the intent in my hiring. The fact is that what happened is in hockey, as we know, it's a male-dominated industry. The whole world is a male-dominated industry. If you look at, facts, CEOs are still 97% are men. That's not a hit. Every job I've ever received, a man has hired me. I am very happy that he did. I work with tremendous men who are incredible colleagues to me. But if we want to create diversity within our game, and I can only speak from the hockey perspective, we have to understand that there are people, gender, people of color, that have not had the opportunities. And what I mean by that is they can't be the most qualified candidate, because how do you become the most qualified candidate when you can't gain the experience because of a lack of? And, if you really think about that, it makes sense. There's no way I could have been as qualified as the men who have come before me, because they have seen themselves in that role for the last 100 years in the National Hockey League. I did not. I didn't see myself in that role till I did that role. So if you don't even know that's something for you, you don't grow up thinking, I'm going to do that. So while I was a very experienced broadcaster, I put my resume up against a lot of people. I had all the major networks. I'd done it all in hockey. I had a good background in it. I obviously come from also a hockey family, so I had this genuine love. But I didn't have very much experience in play-by-play because I had just started and I had to create my own opportunities. There was no feeder system for me. I would have loved to develop in junior and then the American League and then go to ESPN and the NHL. But those opportunities weren't there. So what ESPN did with intent and with me saying, hey, let's do this because I'm going to put in the work. But they just said, listen, she's got qualifications as a broadcaster. She has qualifications as hockey. She's not the most experienced here. But if they don't open the door with intent and give me the opportunity and see my potential, when's it ever going to happen? So they made it happen. And with that, now it's up to me to do the work so that in year 3, 4, 5, I am now just as qualified as my counterparts. But it's not going to happen overnight because I don't know how you guys feel, but learning your job on national television is not exactly fun. And you face a lot of criticism for it, but that's the opportunity I was presented with in order to create that diversity and a new voice in the game. That's what we're doing. So it's just a different way of thinking. And even when you see I had a conversation with Ray Ferraro about this because after I did a speech called Not One of the Boys where I talk about this and he viewed it. And Ray's my colleague at ESPN. I think he's the best color analyst in the business. And his wife got hired as the assistant general manager in Vancouver. And he just looked at me and he said, when you said that to me, I thought, that's Cammie. Wow. Of course she's not as qualified as all these men who have been AGMs before or been in business. Yeah. She has a whole other set of qualifications. And she's got a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing the game because she is female. And it's going to bring diversity of thought into it. And she has the ability to learn the role. So that's why they have senior people to her who are very experienced, who are going to teach her. Just like I have to learn and be taught in my role. And then it's up to the person who gets hired to do the freaking work. And that's the one part that's going to tell if this is an experiment or if this sticks.
Yeah, whoa. That's a great answer. And what you kind of allude to, which I think a lot of people appreciate about what you're doing, is your drive and your push for just trying something different, because you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position where it's tough to, I'm terrible at live TV. I got interviewed today by City TV and I was lost for words because all they were asking about is who should be on the new $20 bill. And I'm like, don't ask me. I'm terrible. I've never done interviews before, which is a hoax. But one of the things that we wanted to ask you is kind of take us through the step-by-step of how you prepare for a play-by-play for whatever it may be, whether it was the NCAA or it is one of the NHL games or even as intense as the playoffs, which, as you know, were one of the best viewed playoffs ever. So that was props. And, you had something to do with that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the process, it's a big one. I mean, it's work. The bottom line is it's work, but when you break it down, so when I get my schedule, which I just received, I will look and see, okay, I have a game. This is my game this week. So say I'm doing the Dallas Stars and the Nashville Predators. The very first thing you do is learn those names and numbers. And for me, because I'm back, when you're working national, it's very different than regional. It's not to say that it's harder. It's just that you're doing different teams every week. So there is that extra work of like flip-flopping to different places. So you really have to know the league. So it starts with the names and numbers. If you do not know those by heart, you are dead in the water. That is the bottom line. And trust me, there are games that I go in when I get busy and you're in that mid-season grind and you've got 2 games in a week where you're kind of sitting there going, oh, geez, I don't, warm-up's happening and it's not coming to you like, and you're like, oh, God, we're in for it now. But, you get through. But the first thing is the name and numbers. And then it's just learning what's going on with the team. And it's, who's scoring, who's on hot streaks, learn it, and you want to have all the tidbits because if your analyst is talking about a player, you want to be able just to drop in a little nugget to support them. At least that's the way I do it. I also believe I'm a storyteller, and that comes from my reporting background. One of the reasons ESPN hired me is because when I do play-by-play, listen, it's a TV format. I don't have to tell you exactly what's going on all the time, which is something I actually struggle with. I have to be better with my breath and economy of words and knowing I don't have to talk all the time because people can see what's going on. But just dropping in information about players. But I think what people have to understand is that as a play-by-play, you have to know everything. It's not just the players. How many people are in that rink? What's the rink's name? What street is it on? Who's all the medical personnel? Because, I'll never forget one night when John Tavares got hurt. And not only did the Toronto training staff came out, but then the Canadiens training staff came out, I believe. And then the doctor who's not even on the bench came out. And Chris Cuthbert, and I'm sure his producers were helping him a little bit, but you got to know. And you have to be able to say the name properly. And so that was a lesson to me. And from now on, when I'm doing games, I have a list of their staff. And, and then you have to know the officials. And then, it just does not stop, right? Like there's so much to know because you do not know where the game is going to take you because the game is the star. At the last minute, especially last year in COVID, we had line adjustments. I was in Anaheim and players were being pulled out right before puck drop. And the PR guys were coming in saying, he's out. He's not playing. He just got pulled. We just got a test back. I'm like, oh, who's in? Some kid. You've never heard of them. And you know what I mean? And I don't mean that rudely, but like they're okay. So there's knowing the American Hockey League. It just, and then the prospects, as I'm saying this, I'm getting anxiety because it does not stop. But it really, at the end of the day, if you know the names and numbers and you have a sense of the team, you will survive. But it is so much more than that. So as soon as you get done one game, it's just study, and watching. I mean, watching teams, I always make sure I watch at least 2 games of each team before I call them because even seeing how players move is very helpful when you're calling a game. Just sometimes their stature on the ice, how they move. I mean, when you have in Chicago both Jones brothers playing in a D pair together, like, come on. Like, are you kidding me? It's like, really? Could you give me a break here? But, it just see how they move differently because you might just see the name, and it's like, oh, kind of thing. So just even little things like that can be helpful. But that's a very long-winded response to preparation. But I'm a big believer. I have flashcards. So I have a number and then I write the name on the back. And so when I'm sitting on a plane, you'll see me and I'll just go through them as fast as I can because that's how fast you have to identify the number. And then I'll put them in their lines, and just to make sure that I know the lines and I can be like, because if you see a line and you're calling, far side can't see the number, but this is the line that's out, pretty good chance if you know that's the guy over there. So just all those little kind of things. And I'm sure there's better ways to prepare that I will learn over time. That's just how I do it right now.
I find one of the most interesting things is some of the names more now than ever are more difficult to say. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. And they keep changing their name, how they want it announced. So they tell one person. So we're from the Edmonton area. And so I've heard the stories between Bob and Jack over the last decade, right? When they're talking back and forth. And I connect with Jack a little bit and I've talked to him on the side. And I just said, dude, how do you, he goes, they say one thing. And then later on, they're like, oh, no, I'm okay. Well, no, now I want to be called this, right? You know,
Well, I mean,
Sakara or Sekara, right?
Marchand, Marchand, Giordano, Giordano. You know, it always happens. And you know, and a lot of times what actually gets to me is I will ask a player, because that's what I always do. If I don't know, I ask the player, and they'll say, and I'll say, how do you say your name? And they'll say it, and then I'll say it back. I was like that, and he's like, oh yeah, that's good enough. Like, especially if they're European, because I'm never going to put like, if you're a French Canadian player, I'm never going to accent it up. I'm English. Yeah. I'm not going to insult you by trying to put like roll an R or do something like that, because I'm not that talented. So I just keep it really as basic as possible. But there is name changes. It happens. It's okay. But then, you know, for me, the golden rule is I always go over my names when we sit down. I sit beside my color guy and we go through all the names. Even if it's John Smith, the name, we say it out loud. Because as long as we're on the same page in the broadcast, at least we have that continuity in our broadcast. So that's the one thing we always do. And if we have a debate about it, we'll bring in the PR team and be like, can you help us with this? Because he's saying it this way, I'm saying it this way. The worst is when you're overruled and you've been practicing it one way, and then you're like, oh, God, now I got to say it like this way. And it usually takes a bit. But I'll never forget when I had to go call San Jose and Jaden Hulbegawaks was in there. And he played in Moose Jaw with the Warriors in junior. And I remember seeing that name. But when you have to say that in real time and the puck goes boom, boom like that, there's no time. I just started calling him J-Dub. After I did it once, I was like, J-Dub, stop puck. I didn't even care. I was like that name is so, the more syllables I find, the harder, just because of the speed of the game.
Well, hey, to honor your time here, Pavel, why don't we ask her a question around women's hockey? So last year, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cassidy Sauvé. She just got signed by the Buffalo Boots.
Yes,
we had her on her show last year. She was calling from Finland, so it was pre-recorded. We're a little confused because she's got some of the outside of injury, she's got some of the best save percentages and goals against average, and she's done nothing but win, it seems. And yet she's never been selected on some of the teams. I got to bring her back and find out some of the. But anyway, we've talked about around women's hockey. In this show we've had lots of conversations, especially around women in hockey. But one thing, I mean, I'm a pro component. I know that some people don't like the women's NBA, the WNBA. I would love a WNHL or an NWHL or something sponsored. And we have a whole bunch of ideas. We love to, you tell us who to send the ideas to. We got them. But the point being is, where do you see women's hockey going? We got two different leagues. I know there's some different opinions that the NHL, as long as something's out there, won't get involved. What are you able to tell us? Some stuff you may not be able to, I don't know.
Well, you're absolutely right that the commissioner, and Gary Bettman is who I speak of, has been very clear, and the NHL hasn't changed their stance that as long as there is a viable option, they're not going to come in and just say, okay, well, we're going to start a league, because they know that would remove those options, because all the players would want to play there, and rightfully so. But at the same time as the NHL says that, truly with the two leagues that have been going on, they all continue to struggle. And until they become partners with the NHL and have that infrastructure just the way that the WNBA has, it's never going to work. That's my opinion. That is not something I'm being told. That is just how I feel. I started calling the women's game. I still love calling the women's game. I wish I could do it more. But, you know, they've just worked both leagues. And I'm a big supporter of the PWHPA. I've called the Secret Dream Gap Tour many times for Sportsnet, along with, you know, Cassie Campbell-Pascal. But I look at the work they're doing and Jana Hefford's doing, and, you know, and the other league is doing a ton of work too. So I don't want to take, you know, anything away, but it just really seems that until the women get on the same page, that we're not really going to move forward. And that's where I think we're at. I mean, you have these two leagues that don't want to come together, or it doesn't seem they want to come together. I know that they've had more talks, I think, than ever before, but you know, at the end of the day, there is a place for women to play, but it's not something that has the long-term sustainability. And that's what the PWHPA is fighting for. And that's what I truly understand is they want the infrastructure. They want the stability. And I think we can look at both leagues and say that that's not there yet. You know, they don't get the benefits that, you know, the male players do. And I don't expect, you know, when I say that, you know, listen, sports is a business. I'm very aware of that. But, you know, you look at the WNBA and what the WNBA is now compared to when it started, and there was a lot of naysayers when it started. But it also comes from the league teams demanding it, from the owners in the National Hockey League saying, we are willing to support a female team and get this league going. Because at the end of the day, Bettman works for them. So, when you see the NBA teams and what they did for that league in supporting them and having them play in their, and speaking about them. Now these women are elite players. They've got a huge TV rights deal. They're getting huge numbers. They've got sneaker deals. They're just living it. And it took so much work by them, but it's possible. That model's possible, but it was associated to the National Basketball Association. And without these women being associated to the National Hockey League, I just don't know how we're ever going to get to that level.
I'm just let's just answer a couple of questions. Some people came on later. So the one question went out. Are you related to Ron Hextall?
Yes, he's my cousin. My first cousin. Our dads are brothers. I was actually his flower girl when he got married. Ronnie is my cuz, but he's just so much older than me. So that's why people always seem to think he's my uncle. So yeah.
Okay, one more question before we go to our final stuff here. Have you got to call in the Olympic hockey games? Jim's asking.
I have not, Jim, but it is definitely a goal. I would really like to call the women's. I have to say, even more so than the men's, it would really mean a lot to my heart to be able to call the women's hockey at the Olympic Games. And I fully feel, the CBC, they had very, Brian Mudryk called this year and he did a great job, but I think it's time. There's qualified women out there. It's time for the CBC to give some of us a call, and it's time for female voices to call female sport.
So, Jim, start calling your MLA. Oh, I mean the local league. All right. Yeah.
Pavel. Well, we can't have you leave before we have a true insider, because my partner here, as we like to say, knows nothing about hockey. So when you talked about all the names and the flashcards that you're learning, I bet you're a whiz with all the players, all the names, but Evan knows nothing. So that makes me feel happy because I can go to a reliable source. But can you share your thoughts on the upcoming season? Any bold predictions, any big trades that may happen that you may know of, or you can share? We're happy to take all that information and be the first ones to report on it, or just your thoughts on who may end up winning the Stanley Cup in 2023.
It's so interesting because I just finished doing, I do my hockey database. So I go through all 32 teams and I kind of look at what they did last season again, all the off-season changes. And there was a lot this year, especially when it came to coaching, but a lot of players were on the move. And I know you guys are in the Edmonton area, and the majority of the games I call on ESPN are the Western Conference. So I do focus on the West more. I think Edmonton's going to, have another strong season. I covered the Battle of Alberta last year in the playoffs. It was awesome. Got to call Game 5 for them and against the Kings. So, this Edmonton team looks good. But I have to say, I'm really intrigued about Vegas this year. Vegas is interesting to me. It's, I will actually be in LA on opening night for Vegas and the Kings. I'll be reporting between the benches, and I've been looking at them, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but when they came into the league, their owner, Bill Foley, said that they would have a Stanley Cup parade by year 6. This is year 6.
Ooh.
There's heat on this team. And this is, they missed the playoffs last year. They're going to be healthier this year, but what is going on in net? Robin Lehner out for the season with a double hip surgery. Laurent Brossoit coming off a hip surgery. They've signed him. He's been a backup, and I'm here in Winnipeg. So, listen, he's a great technically sound goaltender. He's been a great backup, but he doesn't have the body of work yet. The most he's played is 24 games a season because Helly loves to just play, and why wouldn't he? He's a Vezina caliber goaltender. And so, I'm interested to see what's going to happen in net there. They have no room to do anything really. So it's interesting to me, Vegas. I think we could be back into that thing of repeats. I don't know why the Avalanche couldn't win again. I mean, Georgiev comes in to replace Darcy Kemper, so their net seems to be okay. But, honestly, they have so much skill in front that it's, I just really think, wow, like that could be another repeat. We saw Tampa do it. We saw Pittsburgh not do it so long ago. So it kind of seems the thing now where you can repeat more so. So the West, I really am interested in seeing those two teams. But, most of all, I really want to see if the Central ends up with 5 teams in the playoffs again. I don't think that's going to happen this year. No. I think Minnesota might be in a little bit of trouble. They have cap complacency because of the buyouts. We'll see what happens there. So it's just there's so many things, but I think the Winnipeg Jets are in tough. My note about the Jets was "yikes" was what I wrote after the offseason. My Manitobans are really going to love me for that, but I know that they're a very smart group here, so they know how I feel. But I think it's going to be really interesting. And then I don't know who's ever responded so well to being dumped than Brad Trey living in Calgary, because what he did this offseason after Goudreau went somewhere else, bringing in Kadri, the big trade for Kachuk, and Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar are just going to make that team better. So it's just, what I love is that I just rattled on about like 8 different teams that are going to be so highly competitive, right? And then the Kings got better. I mean, Fiala's coming in; they really came along last year. Doughty will be healthy again. They got Mikey Anderson locked up; he's a huge piece to their D. I mean, it's awesome. It's just I'm so excited, and I know the East is over there too, but we're Western.
So let me ask you one last thing then, and we're going to let you go because we've actually pushed you past the time that you had planned. So because you're from Brandon, you must have a little love for Vegas because of McCrimmon. Is there a little bias that you might have because of the connection to McCrimmon being from Brandon? Just curious.
Yes, I am totally. So my very first job was covering the Brandon Wheat Kings. My very first day on the job, I was at Wheat King practice interviewing Ryan Craig, who is an assistant coach. He was the captain of the Brandon Wheat Kings back then. Kelly McCrimmon, if you guys have time for this quick story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
Kelly is very important to me, and this is why. I was early in my career in Brandon, and I got passed over for being the sports director at the local station. And I had been doing the job for a few weeks all by myself because someone had left. And I really thought they went and hired someone else. And this person was qualified and older than me. But I thought, I did that job and I did really good. And then they gave it to him. And I was like, that's not fair, right? So the Wheat Kings had this opening in their PR department. And I always loved being around the rink and dealing with the Wheat Kings. So I applied for it. Kelly interviewed me for it. And I'll never forget, he called me up and he said, Leah, you're qualified for this job. I think you'd be awesome at this job. He said, but I'm not giving it to you because what you're doing is what you were born to do. And when I called my very first NHL game, it was the Flames in Calgary against the Golden Knights. And as I walked to the booth, Kelly was standing there waiting for me to wish me luck. And so I have to say, as much crap is going on with hockey right now, there are some very incredible people in it, and he's one of them. But I will say this, my professional opinion is he's on the hot seat right now because he's fired coaches that got teams into the playoffs, and you always know GMs have 2 coaches before it looks at him by what's going on here. So I think he's probably going to feel a bit of pressure, but I definitely have deep roots. I'm a big fan of Kelly, and that's the great thing about hockey is the people that you meet along the way.
That's true. Although I will say that I think Bruce Boudreau was the coach in Minnesota where he went through 3 GMs before he actually got let go. Right. So that's the exception to the rule.
That is an exception to the rule. But, and I've always never really understood that because, I mean, the GM is supposed to build the team.
Yeah.
I know you hire the coach, but if you build a good team and the coach and they underperform, I always look, that's a coaching thing. So why is the GM? But anyways, that's for another.
So I like to just say this about McCrimmon. If anyone follows, I'm the guy that is the guru when it comes to the prospects and the young teams and the junior leagues. And I will tell everyone that's listening here the reason I keep supporting and dealing with all the salary cap and one of our listeners calls in all the time. Zylstra just doesn't like the Golden Knights at all. But I think Kelly has always found a way to trade, to change things. He is a smart hockey mind. And I think he is years ahead of other people. He's thinking 4 or 5 years down the road. And I got a feeling we're going to talk about this actually after you're off, Pierre. But we're going to talk about there's a lot of GMs giving out contracts that are extended probably past them, and they're going to be somebody else's problem. Mm-hmm. But I actually think Kelly thinks probably 5 years ahead of this. He's still there. Is this going to be okay?
And I would agree with you because, when you talk about the moves, you go back to his junior days, for most of it. Yes, Kelly owned the Wheat Kings in Brandon in the Western League, but he was often the head coach and GM for many years. And every trade deadline, he was making moves. And that's why they made the playoffs almost every year consistently when he was around. He has always been a guy where something's happening. He never sits still, but he also isn't reactive. You know, and that's the biggest thing. I know like that's one of the things why it's probably a bias that people are going to think, but my cousin Ron's a GM in Pittsburgh. And what I admire about him is, yes, he was very fiery on the ice, but if you actually know Ron, he is such an even keel. And he really, you cannot react. Like same thing with Lou Lamoriello, all these guys, people are criticizing him on the island about you didn't do enough in the off season. You can't react if you're a general manager. If you do that, head in the water. And it's not good for the fans because at the end of the day, it's a reason we're in a flat cap. It's a reason we've had 2 lockouts in my lifetime is because GMs were overreactive, throwing out these big contracts, and the game couldn't sustain it. So a lot of agents who would disagree with me, they would love to see contracts back, and I feel for them. It's very interesting, but we'll wait and see how Vegas does. But they're in it, right? Like it's going to be a big year for them, and we'll see if the premonition of Mr. Foley comes true, and he can get that Stanley Cup parade down the strip. Because what a parade that would be! Come on now.
Well, thank you so much for taking time tonight and joining us. Looking forward to those first 2 games calling for the Golden Knights. Actually, I will be listening in, and I'll be cheering you on from the corner. You won't hear me. But if you hear any critiquing, that's just my pal, the insider, because you're messing up all the names and he just can't handle it.
That's right. Well, I have to tell you, I've got an Edmonton game on my schedule, not in Edmonton, but I have Edmonton on my schedule, and Calgary. We have a game in Calgary this year in the first 3 months, and there's another game that I have where Winnipeg's playing Arizona. So it's really nice. ESPN's got a little bit more Canadian content.
Woo! I love it.
I'm pretty excited about it.
got the full package this year, so I get it all.
There you go.
So now we just want to say, do you want to share any kind of Twitter account or anything where you want people to follow you or give you a look or check out a book or anything? Like, what do you want to share? How do you want people to connect with you if they want more information about Leah Hextall?
Yeah, so I'd love to tell people my Twitter handle and my social media if you're going to be nice, because I have a nice relationship with social media ever since I started calling games. But no, I'm at Leah Hextall everywhere on social media. I only have Instagram and Twitter. I'm not a big media person. If you're trying to get a hold of me on Twitter, it's kind of hard because my direct messages are off and it's highly filtered just because for my own mental health. But that's that. But I also have a website, leahhextall.com, and there's an email address where you can email, and it does come to me, good or bad. And I love hearing from people. I really do. It's honestly what keeps me going is the notes I get from, all sorts of different people across the board. And even if it is constructive criticism, when it's done in the right way, I appreciate it.
So a couple of comments. So it's funny, Jim quickly, he says, "Thank you for coming on, ? I think you didn't mean to say question mark, Jim, but and then Zilster was just saying thanks. And then Jim did want to know about Ranger games, and they also wanted to know about Montreal. So guys, go on. You got to go check out. Go to our website. Are you gonna? So how will they know the games you're going to call? Is there any way?
You're like usually on my social media, you'll see what I'm preparing for every week because I kind of let people in on the process, and usually it's me sitting at my desk with a big glass of red wine. But it's usually you'll find out that way. But yeah, it's one of those things. That's actually a good point. It's probably something I should do on my website is just put out my schedule. I just don't usually because things can change and whatnot. But, I call weekly. So I'm around. But as for Rangers games, I would love to call a Rangers game. I don't think I'm ready yet. They're one of those big draw teams. I shouldn't say that. I'm ready. I just don't. Ready. That's coming that way. I'm trying. My mental skills coach will be like, "Don't say that." But my grandfather played for the Rangers and is a Hall of Famer for them. And his banner in 1940, where he scored the game winner in OT against the Leafs to win the Cup, is there. And I got to be between the benches there this season reporting.
That's awesome.
It was pretty freaking special. So I would love to call a Blue Shirts game.
I think you're ready. I think I speak for both Evan and I and all that I think you're ready for the Rangers game.
We're chugging it up. We're hopefully maybe season 3 if it maybe then, but we'll see what happens this year.
We've had people on the show who have promoted themselves or been promoted. So this is only going to work in your favor being on our show.
So,
There you go.
so,
There
so
you
so Leah, I do want to say, I won't use names, but people will know who I'm talking about. We did have the New York Rangers just actually say someone could not come on our show. I said, and so I was just like, oh, okay, well, we'll make that up to that. So I understand the high standards that they have. But
They have high standards there. They are an original
Yeah.
six for a
Yeah.
reason, and they do their thing there.
I told my friend, I said, well, you just tell Chris to call me, right? And we'll talk about it. Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you guys. This has been so much fun. And I told you I'd end up talking too much, and here we are. We've talked, twice as long as we thought we were going to, because I don't know how to shut up sometimes, but that's why I'm a broadcaster.
Awesome.
So
Well, and that's why this is called Hockey Talk.
there you go. Thank you for making me feel better, Evan. I appreciate it. But Pat, Evan, thank you guys so much for having me on. It really was a pleasure. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yes. Awesome. Take care and have a great season. Cheers.
You guys talk soon. Enjoy.
Keep your stick on the ice.
I will try.
All right,
Evan, I'm a little
Pavel.
dark. I'm going to brighten myself up.
Okay, well, Pavel is brightening himself up. I don't know how we're going to follow up with that here, guys. So Hans, he's coming in here. Now, I'm sorry, Hans, I didn't get this together. What's your signature saying? Like, holy Makana? So I don't know Hans, but Hans, go follow her on Twitter and tweet her at Leah Hextall. And if you go on Twitter, if not, go on Instagram. I don't know because she's not on Facebook, obviously.
Or she's just not adding us as friends, as she told us. And I do want to do a little shout out for Jim. I had a little conversation with him this morning. He has been asked to be the new organizer or one of the key organizers for a ball hockey group for both men and women, both roller and street hockey. So it's pretty exciting. So props to Jim. Again, being on the show gets you perks, except for us. I'm still waiting for my perks.
Well, hey, there are a few things, guys, that we only got about 5 minutes to quickly talk about. We were talking about those salaries, right? Because the salary last week they were asking about what about Johnny Gaudreau? What about Keith Tkachuk's new deal? What about we were saying about Stützle last week? So is this interesting? Let me give me your take on this, Pavel. Salaries have become so high. Like we just saw some new Jordan
Kyrou signed 8.123, similar to what Rob Thomas signed, as well as St. Louis.
So we're finding players that are not even point per game are going in the 8s or minimum 7s. These are guys that may never be a point per game, getting these huge deals. They're going early into their elite level contracts. They're not going into bridge deals. They're moving quickly. There's a whole bunch of different reasons behind this, obviously. And they seem to be 6 to 8 year deals. And then what about the future when we got the Kadris and the Huberdeaus? These guys are signing for massive dollars at older ages that take them to at least 35, 37 years old in between there. And these contracts, the GM may not even be there.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that it's a twofold thing. The cap will go up in a couple of years. It's gotta. I mean, from the conservative estimates that the NHL has presented this past summer, they made $5.6 billion with all the ad revenues, the helmet revenues, all that, and now they're having ad logos on the on the jersey. So that is going to increase the cap because it's been a bit of a flat cap for the last little bit due to COVID. So that's understandable. The big thing that I think GMs are afraid of is what happened in Calgary with Johnny Gaudreau and Brad Treliving and the Flames, where he just walked. And I feel that the teams are trying to get in control of these young stars, whether they're superstars or not, or they'll come into their own, and they don't want to lose a player for nothing. Now, Calgary was able, as Leah Hextall kind of mentioned, have a great summer and trade for Huberdeau, Weegar, first rounder, a few other things, and replace what they lost. And, fortunately, Matthew Tkachuk was kind enough to let the organization know that, he wants to be dealt, so he went to Florida. That being said, a lot of GMs got spooked and said, I don't want to lose my guy for nothing, and they're just going to walk and go to free agency and go to a team that can pay him that. So they're locking up their big guys for the potential of what if. Does it work out? We will see at the end of their careers. It's hard to judge immediately because people like to jump initially, as Leah talked about GMs. It's like you can't be reactive. You got to see where it ends up. There's always risk of injury. There's always a risk of potentially going down. There's always a risk of not producing for what you want to, right? It does happen.
Yeah.
And decline. But a lot of these guys are getting paid now for what they can be rather than what they have done. And I think that's just the name of the game. And I always find it silly that a player or fans criticize players for wanting a big payout when in fact it's billionaires who have all this extra money that they can pay out and give these players things. What? You don't like my rants?
We're picking on the billionaires. Let's talk more about that next week.
Sure. But what
I want to talk about billionaires. Billionaires or millionaires? Whose side are you on? And let's have that discussion. But we only got a couple minutes left here. So I want to mention to everybody for next week, we have, just so you guys know, Jamie Basco. He's a writer. He's a sports writer, and he's also does editing work with them. But this guy creates the content. He does all the inside interviews with the Philadelphia Flyers. So we were just talking about the Flyers. Now, of course, that is no longer the home of Ron Hextall. If you guys haven't followed for a while, you've been out in the boonies. But Jamie Basco's coming on next week. This guy is going to lead into all the discussions around the Philadelphia Flyers. So if you got questions, any of you guys this week, make sure you send them to us so that we can make sure to ask those questions. Jamie is it like I will tell you this. Last year, Jamie came on this show. I thought the Flyers were going to win the cup. Do you remember that?
I do.
And then I followed them on
Twitter. They had a good team on paper, they had made the playoffs 2 years prior. So it was every odd season that they were making it. So I even picked them to making the playoffs and going on a good run. But clearly, things fell off the rails, and there's a lot of question marks. And now John Tortorella is making some comments in public about the leadership and the atmosphere in the locker room. So you wonder, is that gonna, what's it called? Is that gonna have an impact? And the biggest question that I think they have on top of, injuries and stuff is, will Ryan Ellis play? They traded for him.
Oh, yeah.
Will he be a player there and be able to play even 50 games for them? Because that's a big deal.
And that's why we're bringing Jamie on for you guys next week. So we have been very fortunate. So again, send stuff to us. Let us know. Now, you guys heard a little earlier, I was talking to Leah Hextall. We have been turned down. We do not have our special guests of the last 2 years. And I will now, I just didn't want to say it in front of poor Leah. But the New York Rangers have apologetically declined to allow their play-by-play for their AHL farm team, the Hartford Wolfpack, Alex Thomas. Alex has greatly apologized. It's just, it's all politics, everyone, just so you understand. But I think that we should ask Alex to be our insider, and I won't tell you that I've got my information from Alex.
What did we ever do against the New York Rangers organization to get them not to allow to have Alex Thomas on the show? I see. But it's okay. Clearly somebody in the New York Rangers organization is watching this show, probably on the toilet, but that's okay.
Oh, hey, Hans tells us that we should eat pickled eggs our next show. Okay. All right, guys. Well, so because Alex not going to be on, we had booked all these guys into a tight battle. We also have Willie Paylov, scout, writes a contributor for the Red Line Report, which is one of my favorites to talk CHL. I do want to just give a quick note to everybody. The Canadian Hockey League launched already. So they got started in their season early. They launched, I believe it was September 4th. So if you haven't, and go to our Facebook page, follow, like, subscribe, share. On our Facebook page, though, we keep you updated on ball hockey, on street hockey, with big tournaments going on. We talk about the Canadian Hockey League. I even got some updates there. Connor Bedard has come out of the gates in the preseason flying. This year's predicted, and it's not just predicted, he will be the first overall pick. Then not just Willie Paylov, who is with the Halifax Mooseheads and following them in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey, but we also have Kevin Manson, who is an editor for Sven Hockey and everything post-Soviet. We're going to talk about Mishkov, who has been rated the only challenger to Bedard for next year. So we got some really exciting. And you guys, as you know, some of you like Hockey Buzz, some don't, but it's definitely controversial for some. But he's out there, and following Sens Hockey is Kevin Francis. But in the place of Kevin, we are going to be looking out for a select group of our buddies who will be co-hosting our show, and we're going to bring up Octagon together. You guys heard that. We're gonna bring an Octagon gathering on September 28th of the hockey minds of the superfans to duke it out for prediction supremacy. So look out for that show. I think there's going to be a lot of arguing going on and probably a lot of drinking going on. Because they all got to put up with Pavel's rant.
That's true. They really do. They have to listen to me speak for 50 plus minutes.
Oh, man. All right. Oh, Jim. Okay, I got to finish with this. Jim just said he's going to call the Rangers for us.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. We have another
Any last thoughts
calling for on our behalf. I like.
Any last thoughts, buddy?
No, thanks to Leah Hextall for being on the show. It was a treat and an honor to having her on. We hope you enjoyed having her on. Again, give her a follow. She's wonderful. You know, put aside what you think and give her an opportunity because she does some great work. And I look forward to hearing some more play-by-play commentary from her this upcoming season.
Absolutely. So, well, guys, in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice.